We, all of us, know well the three levels of mind, the sensual so-called. I call it the nitty-gritty, that level where the laws of action and reaction abide. And then the aesthetic, I call it the airy-fairy, that vast realm of the occult, where the etheric energies play, and the transcendent or transcendental level, that level of interrelatedness and relativity. But how do we know when those three levels of mind have merged in us, instead of being existence, knowledge, and bliss, so-called, they become the one word, Satchitananda. Let's test ourselves and find out, indeed, whether those three levels are united in us, never again to be dimensional. Jesus the Christ was walking down the road with a group of his disciples when there were those peasants and others standing on the side of the road who began to jeer and mock and deride him. But he merely turned around and bowed to them and gave them his blessing. Further down the road, one of his disciples said, "Master, why did you allow those people to mock you and sneer at you? Why didn't you scold them?" Jesus the Christ replied, "I can only spend what I have in my purse." And then there was a man who heard of Mullah Nasruddin. He heard that he was a great mystic and a great teacher, so he traveled from a very far distance, going through many trials and tribulations to seek out Mullah Nasruddin. Well, it so happened Mullah Nasruddin was in retreat in a cave high up in the mountains. But the seeker found his way and made the arduous journey up the side of the mountain and was greeted at the cave entrance by Mullah Nasruddin's wife and invited in to sit down where the mullah was seated by a small brazier. But when the seeker entered, there was the mullah blowing very fiercely on his hands. And after giving the normal greetings, the seeker said to the mullah, "Mullah, please, will you tell me why was it that you were blowing on your hands?" "Oh," said the mullah, "I'm blowing on them to make them warm." Well, the seeker sat and waited for some words of wisdom to come from the mouth of the mullah, but he didn't speak at all. But after a while, the mullah's wife brought in several bowls of hot soup for each of them. Immediately, the mullah took his bowl of soup and began to blow on it. And the seeker asked the mullah, "Mullah, tell me, what are you doing?" And the mullah said, "I'm blowing on my soup to make it cool." The seeker thought to himself, "I've come to see a madman. First he blows on something to make it warm, and then he blows on something to make it cold. So after giving enough time for there to be a courteous visit, he made his salutations and went down the mountain scratching his head, wondering why he'd wasted all his time. And then, finally, there's a story of a rabbi, a Hasidic rabbi, who had gathered around him a group of his Hasidim, and he said to them, "I have an important question to ask of you. How do you tell the difference between night and day?" Now the Hasidim knew that this was a very important question, and they thought they all understood. After all, there were many prayers and rituals that had to be undertaken during the night hours, and there were those that could only take place during the daytimes. So the first Hasidim, who happened to be the most intelligent, he said to the rabbi, "Rabbi, I know when the day has dawned, when I look out of my window and I can see clearly the fence between my house and my neighbor's house." And then a second Hasidim said, "Rabbi, I know when it's the daytime, when I wake up and I can see clearly my neighbor's house in the distance." And then a third said, "I know when it's the daytime, when I look out of my window and I can tell the difference whether it's a sheep or a cow in the field nearby." And another said, "I know it's the dawn arriving, when I look out of my window and I can see the difference between the colors of the flowers. There's a yellow one, there's a red one, there's a blue one." At each of these answers, the rabbi's face grew more dark, and the frown on his face deepened. And when all the answers had been given, he scolded them. "Listen to you. Division, division, division. All I hear from you is a difference, the divide, the difference between your neighbor's house and your own, the difference between this animal and that, the difference between the colors of the flowers. Is there not enough division in this life?" All of the Hasidim were deeply chastened by their rabbi's wrath, and they asked, "Please, Rabbi, will you tell us then, how do we tell the difference between night and day?" The rabbi, in a very soft voice filled with longing, replied, "Tell me, what did the rabbi say to his Hasidim?"
said.
It sort of seems to me that between the thread between the three stories is like it's the same. That in the middle story when he blew on the hot and blew on the cold, it was the same action. And the circumstances were different, but it was the same action. There's something about that. That's the same with night and day. That beyond night and day, there's that which is beyond night and day. And the one with Jesus stumped me a bit, but maybe it's that when Jesus says, I can't spend what isn't in my purse, that in his purse is only love, and love is beyond all things. Love is beyond scolding, and it's beyond. So I guess I don't know exactly what he would have said, but something like that.
When I heard those three stories, later on I thought it's the faculty of the mind, in three ways, like feeling, wanting, and thinking, and it's all happening in contrast, in duality. Like the first story reminded me of reacting to the outside world in a positive or negative manner, and not quite sure why he said the spending what he has. He can only spend what he's got in his mind, but it's just basically I can't react to something, and what I don't have in my purse I can't give out, basically. And the second story was like, because Jesus more like maybe feeling in an emotional way. The second story with the master wanting to change all the time what was. He was basically giving a demonstration how we always want things to be different. It's either too hot or it's either too cold, and it's just the faculty of wanting always, not letting things be the way they are. And the third story was more like about thinking, like discerning what we're doing all the time, defining, which means having boundaries, day and night, good and bad, all that, without that we couldn't be, that's what thinking is discerning. And all three of them pointed to something which is, we all do it, but it's within something bigger, which actually which is non-duality.
Yes. Yes. So how do we know when we're no longer caught or vacillating or moving between these three levels of mind? Or even having a need when we've got something going on at the nitty-gritty cause and effect level, where somebody's in your face or causing you some distress, and you consciously bring it up to a level of interrelatedness. Oh yes, really we're all one, and I can understand them because they've got such and such going on in their lives. This is imagination of mind, isn't it? We know that we can do that, so we can play within those fields. But when do we know when none of this is going on in our life anymore?
With a huge sigh of relief.
You bet.
It's a huge sigh of relief.
It's like, ah.
When you just do it and you don't
And
have
therein
to
lies
think.
the clue, isn't it? Therein lies the clue. Yes. What am I going to tell you?
What came to me actually when you were talking about that, Marianne, was that sense of limitlessness, and and our thoughts tend to limit us.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, so I think it's like you say actually, when you're not, when you just, whatever happens without the thought and the machinations and the planning or the puzzlement or whatever. Perhaps.
Absolutely, isn't it? Yes.
Strange, the clearest message that I got, it just sort of came up like a little dinging bell. It's like, thought is also God.
All right. If it all is, how could it not be?
Yeah. Because sometimes like this, oh, my mind is very busy.
That's a revelation,
But
isn't
yeah,
it?
it's, yeah. That's okay.
Do we ever know?
You bet. You bet.
I think the key word in the last thing you said was in a tone of longing. And I went, like, you know, okay, I can answer these questions. And then you went longing, and I went, longing? What is the longing? And I focused on that, and that's where I realized that, I mean, the human mind can turn night into day and day into night, can turn anything into anything. We're so busy with everything that we create, our own passions, our own thoughts, our own this, our own that. It's so hard to just, and that's where the sigh of relief comes in. You drop all that. We carry it around all the time, like a big basket, always trying to sort it out. Very hard to get to that. And I looked at your candle. Thank you for the candle, because the candle holds that space of sort of, it is like the internal, the unchanging, the center, you know, you can't put into words. The Buddha said, those who know, know, and those who don't know, so why shouldn't I just sit here and be quiet?
And to what it needs to be hot, it's hot, and to what it needs to be cold, it's cold. That's what I have to say.